Hi, if you love movies and breathing, that was stupid to say, right? There is probably no one who doesn't love movies. Anyway, chances are you've dreamed at least once of being in an actor's shoes. And I don't mean only 16 plus scenes. You get to say cool lines, you're surrounded by the most beautiful people, you get paid ton of money, and you're deeply worried about some endangered animal species on the other side of the planet. The problem is that usually to get into movies you need acting education, a great agent and so on, but not always. Today I'll tell you a few amazing stories about how today's Hollywood stars got their first roles. Let's start with everyone's favorite, Jason Statham. When he was young, he was a professional athlete and was part of the British national diving team. Sports didn't bring Jason any serious medals or money, and after his athletic career, he ended up selling fake jewelry and perfume on the street. That's where he was noticed by a scout from a modeling agency, and Jason began appearing in fashion brand catalogs. Finally, he was getting paid for being filmed in his underwear. For his debut film, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, Guy Ritchie was looking for the right type, regular street guys, and Statham's photos caught his eye. At the audition, Jason was asked to sell something to the director, and as an experienced street hustler, he handled the task brilliantly. That's how his successful acting career began, one in which for the most part he was simply playing himself. In the late 1990s, Chris Pratt was living in Hawaii. He didn't have a steady job or a permanent place to live. He slept in a van, took the small side gigs, and enjoyed his youth. One day he got a job as a waiter at a small tourist restaurant called Baba Gum Shrimp Company. There, he ended up serving a well-known actress Rae Dawn Chong, who was preparing for her director debut. While bringing out the shrimp, Pratt was so charismatic that the actress asked him if he was an actor. Even though Chris had nothing to do with acting at the time, he said yes. They exchanged contacts, and later Rae offered him a role in her short film Cursed Part 3. The project didn't become especially well known, but it opened the door for Pratt to enter big cinema. The next two heroes of our story got into movies simply by tagging along. Mel Gibson had already started studying at the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Australia, but at that point he had no real practical experience. And more importantly for this story, he had no intention of auditioning for Mad Max at all, he was just giving a friend a ride. The day before, Gibson had gotten into a fight and his face was covered in bruises and swelling. Director George Miller was holding a casting call based on looks and was searching for ugly guys for background roles. So Gibson was told to come back once his face had healed. After recovering, Mel returned as a completely different person, with striking looks and powerful charisma. The transformation was so impressive that instead of being offered a spot as an extra, he was invited to audition for the lead role. A similar stroke of luck, combined with striking looks, marked the beginning of Johnny Depp's career as well. In the early 1980s, he wasn't dreaming of becoming an actor at all, but a musician. Depp came to the audition for A Nightmare on Elm Street not to get a role, but simply to support his friend, aspiring actor Jackie Earle Haley. Director Wes Craven noticed Johnny's distinctive appearance and suggested he read a few lines as well. The role itself wasn't very significant, but Depp's natural and forced performance impressed the director more than his friend's more deliberate attempt. Craven's daughter, who was also present at the casting, pointed out Depp's magnetism, which further convinced the director to cast him. Barkhad Abdi, who played the lead pirate in Captain Phillips, actually comes from Somalia. Fleeing the civil war, his family first moved to Yemen and then to Minneapolis. There, he studied at university and worked part-time as a limousine driver. Out of around 700 applicants, Abdi showed up for the open casting call for Captain Phillips. By the second day, only 40 people were left, and they were asked to perform a scene on camera. Then the number was cut down to 4, all of them, by the way, guys Abdi knew from his neighborhood. In the end, only he remained. The casting directors weren't looking for polished by the book acting, but for raw energy and natural character, and that's exactly what Barkhad had. It's important to note that he turned out to be capable of much more than just playing a pirate, a role that, by the way, earned him Academy Award and Golden Globe nominations. He later continued his acting career in projects like Blade Runner 2049 and the series Castle Rock. By the way, you can check my video reconstructing real events from Captain Phillips right here. Charlize Theron came to Los Angeles from South Africa, hoping to build a career as a dancer, but a knee injury left her without work. She had no source of income, so one day she went to her bank to cash a check her mother had sent her from South Africa. Because of technical issues, the cashier couldn't process it. Those were Charlize's last remaining money, and in desperation she had a full-blown meltdown right there in the bank. A witness to this scene happened to be an acting agent. The intense, emotional young woman caught his attention and he gave her his business card. It wasn't an offer for a specific role yet, but that moment marked the very beginning of her path to Hollywood. So yes, take Charlize's life hack into account, but keep in mind that this kind of performance can attract not only an agent, but the police as well. Rosario Dawson didn't even have to throw a tantrum to get her first shot at the movies. She was simply sitting with her friends on the front steps of her home in New York when screenwriter Harmony Korine and director Larry Clark happened to walk by. They were looking for ordinary teenagers for their upcoming film Kids. Rosario's confident, straightforward look caught their attention. They stopped to talk to her and sometime later invited her to audition, which she successfully passed. Everything Danny Trejo ever did on screen, he had done in real life long before that. He struggled with substances, was involved in street crime, and as a result, he spent a significant amount of time in prison. While incarcerated, he took up boxing, became physically tough, and managed to overcome his addictions. His first time on a film set had nothing to do with acting. One of the actors in Runaway Train was fighting addiction, and Danny was there as his mentor and consultant. Trejo's tough look and prison tattoos caught the attention of director Andrei Konchalovsky. He asked him, "Have you ever played a boxer who was also a convict?" "I played him in every prison in the state," Trejo replied, and that's how he got his first role. In the early 1990s, Matthew McConaughey was studying law in Austin and preparing for life buried in boring paperwork. But one evening, after walking into the bar at the Hyatt Regency, he met producer Don Phillips. They ended up drinking together for the entire night. Don was struck by Matthew's look and asked if he was an actor. Matthew replied that he'd like to try. Soon after, he was invited to audition for Richard Linklater, the director of Dazed and Confused. Matthew was cast as the character Wooderson. At first, the role was supposed to include just a few lines, but his improvisation worked so well that the character was expanded right during filming. In the end, Wooderson became one of the most memorable characters in the movie, and that's exactly where his iconic phrase "alright, alright, alright" was born. Eva Mendes' neighbor was an aspiring photographer. He needed to build a portfolio, but he didn't have any models, so as a favor, he asked Eva to pose for him. When he started showing those photos to agents, everyone kept asking not for his business card, but for Eva's phone number. She didn't land major roles right away, but admitted that's pretty unusual first step towards success. And finally, I want to tell you an amazing story about the rebirth of an acting career. Harrison Ford dreamed of being an actor, but for a long time he only landed small roles and minor appearances. By the age of 30, he was forced to become a carpenter to support his family. One of his jobs came from Lucasfilm, where he was hired to install a door. At the same time, George Lucas was holding auditions for Star Wars, casting the roles of Leia and Luke. Lucas met Ford and recognized him. Before quitting acting, Harrison had appeared in a small role in Lucas's early film American Graffiti. Lucas asked Ford to help the actors during auditions by reading the lines of Han Solo. No one treated this as an audition, it was just a friendly favor, so Harrison read the lines indifferently, with sarcasm and no desire to impress anyone. That's when George Lucas realized this was the perfect way Han Solo should sound. I hope you won't be as indifferent to this video and that you leave a like and a comment. Thanks for watching, this was Nikita, see you soon.